Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonati. Today I'm going to talk about this chunky collection, Ingathering, The Complete People Stories by Zenna Henderson. Zenna Henderson was very well known for the people stories, which she published from the 1950s through the 1980s. And this is a collection of all 17 of the stories, including one that wasn't published until this collection after, I believe, Henderson had died. This is the Nesfa Press edition that you can get if you're interested in it. So let's talk about the people. This is very heavy, so I'm not going to hold it up the entire time. These stories are all basically soft social science fiction. They're very heavy on people and emotions, and less so about the science fiction, the aliens, the technology. The people are very human aliens who come to Earth seeking a new home and a refuge after their original home is destroyed. Their spaceship kind of breaks up in the atmosphere, and the people are scattered across Southwest America in their life pods. And they are separated from each other. Many of them can't find each other again. They're often, mentally, emotionally traumatized, but also physically injured from this. And all of the stories really are about the communities, the gatherings of people who have found each other again, and the people who realize they're different but don't know where they belong until they eventually find the people that they belong to. Many of them are also descendants of the original survivors of the accident, either completely people with a capital P or half human, half people. And so the descendants usually don't know anything about where they came from, and their parents or other relations are dead or they were orphaned and such. One of the things that I think really characterizes these stories is that they're frequently about teachers and students. There's often adult-child relationships in these stories. It makes a lot of sense when you know that Henderson was a teacher. She taught children for decades, and she really portrays children accurately, both young children and teenagers. Almost all of my favorite stories were about teachers reaching out to a particular student or their group of students, or adults who come to care for a child that they have found, who is usually one of the people. And I think part of the reason this works so well is that these are usually stories and relationships that show a lot of compassion and kindness. This is absolutely something that I love about the people stories. It is easy to see the people, to kind of cast them in the role of angels, given that the people are very Christian. They're aliens, but they are Christian to a T, and their faith and their beliefs is mentioned very frequently in these stories, and they are very good. There's this essential thread of goodness throughout their makeup and their community and such. But they're not perfect. They're not actually angels. The one time in all of these stories where one of the people actually tries to pretend to be an angel, it does not go very well. But sometimes you just need to read about people who are trying to do the right thing, who are trying to find those who are suffering, who need help, and then to help them and to heal them. And not just always in the physical sense, but also sometimes in the mental sense as well. So let's talk a bit about the individual stories in this. The people stories were originally published in 2 collections, and each of those collections had its own framework story, and those are all reprinted in the big complete collection. I did not like the framework stories. I thought they were very unnecessary. I think they are there to tell the reader how the stories are connected, with this concept of ingathering. However, I don't think that context is necessary. I think all of these stories naturally stand on their own, and when they do have connections to each other, it's pretty obvious. I actually hated the Leah interludes, which is the framework story for the first half. I wish that I didn't hate them. It's about a woman who is depressed and suicidal and is kind of taken into the people's community and healed in a way. I thought it was extremely emotional, almost unreadable because of it, almost hysterical in places, and way too drawn out. The second set of interludes are about Mark and Maris. This made much more sense because they are actually introduced in their own story, which I quite enjoyed. But like the Leah interludes, they don't provide a context that's necessary to understand or enjoy the story. So I just thought, like, you could skip reading the interludes. My favorite stories are all the earliest ones. The first 5 or 6 stories in this are the best. Ararat, Gilead, Pottage, Wilderness, Captivity. If you're gonna read any one of the people stories, read Ararat or Captivity. For me, Captivity is the quintessential people story. This is the peak. It doesn't get any better than this particular story. It is about a teacher with her student trying to reach out to him and treat him like an actual person and find out what he needs, why he's acting out, why he's not trying hard enough, why is he viewed as an outsider and, you know, a good-for-nothing hooligan in his community. It brought me to tears. It was so good. I think that No Different Flesh is the one that introduces Mark and Maris, and I really enjoyed that story. Also, Angels Unawares and Troubling of the Water. After that point, in the second half of this collection, mostly the stories published in like the 70s and 80s, they were fine, but they weren't the best. Some of them felt like they were retreading the same ground as the better stories did. I think like The Indelible Kind perhaps was one that I just was like, no, you already did this. So yeah, the first half of this is so worth reading. The second half was still good, but not that, you know, peak of excellence for me. There were also a couple stories in this that I found relatively unreadable. Deluge is one of the early stories that I just couldn't read. I skim read most of it because it was so boring to me, and I couldn't really tell you why. This is actually an important story because it describes the event that made the people leave their original home, and it's kind of a jumping off point for a bunch of the stories that come after it. You're introduced to people in their original home, and then the following stories tell you what happened to them when they were separated on Earth, and did they find each other again. So I should have found the story very interesting, but I didn't. I just was completely bored by it. Same kind of thing with Tell Us a Story and Michael Without, which are much later stories. Didn't find them to be very interesting. In some ways, they didn't feel quite like people stories, maybe because they followed a different format and structure or something. So yeah, these are really interesting stories. I don't think that they feel like hard science fiction. The people don't ever explain their technology. They have a lot of psychic powers like telepathy and telekinesis, which I don't view as very science fictional. And from this era of science fiction, it was definitely a thing, and people would have thought of it as science fiction, but I don't really in the modern day. But honestly, if you want to read something that's a little bit old-fashioned but genuinely kind and well-meaning and about good people trying to help each other, try reading some of the original people stories. They are really quite good. I think those are all of my scattered thoughts on Ingathering right now. Sorry if this was a bit meandering. I didn't exactly prepare what I was going to say before I sat down to film, but I hope that it comes across that I'm like genuinely fond and enthusiastic about this particular collection and about a lot of what I think Henderson was saying in these stories. It is really what I needed to read right now, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. So I hope that some of you will also enjoy reading it. If you have read these stories and you have any thoughts about them, do leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know what people thought about these stories and possibly anything else that Henderson wrote, because I know she did write other short stories that are not part of the People universe, but I've never really heard anything about those. So with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back again to talk to you soon, and until then, bye.